So today I am interviewing, so everyone, you know, my first video, and I'm interviewing the wonderful Aisha Fukushima. Did I get that correct?
Fukushima.
So I'm very honoured to have you,
Thank you for having
on my channel.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
To be the first person, I feel very honoured for that. So thank you very much. So I would like you to talk more about introduce who you are, your culture, as in your background, and what is raptivism and why did you start it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow, those are so many big questions. So I am a singer, I am a speaker, and I'm also a raptivist or a rap activist. And for me, social justice and the arts have always gone together in some capacity. And that's something that I started to learn as a young person and then have continued to manifest in my adulthood. And one of the things that have been born from that is called Raptivism, the hip hop project that I started. And it spans across 12 different countries and 4 continents, essentially where I'm building solidarity through hip hop culture. No matter where I get off a plane or what neighborhood I walk into, I find some thread of hip hop culture, whether that be through graffiti or emceeing or breakdancing or turntablism, DJing. And I think that it's a global phenomena that can be used to unify people beyond kind of the surface aspect that we get in the media, the top 40 playlists and stuff. There's a lot of profound critical thinking, intellectual culture, movement building that's part of hip hop. So that's part of why I do raptivism and the work that I do.
So going back to what you were saying in terms of social justice, why do you think social justice is important, and how come you tied it with hip hop? Yeah,
I think social justice is important because it's kind of a norm, I think, for me at least, that to put it in another way, Angela Davis talks about how activism is not only a daily choice, but it's something that's just like, it shouldn't be a question, right? That social justice, having people treated with humanity and respect, is just kind of a base for how we can get along in this world. And so for me, it's not so much of a question of like, oh, should I care about it? It's like, of course I care about it. Of course. You know? And then in terms of hip hop, like I was mentioning, hip hop is very much a global culture that spans all around the world, and it connects people. And I know that whether I was touring in Kazakhstan or Belarus or when I'm in Senegal, that there are always these connections through the culture where all of a sudden I have a community immediately, and we all have a wavelength where we can enter a really critical discourse and we can organize quickly as well. And that a lot of young people are listening to hip hop, and they're also at the front rows of social change that we see around the world. So it's important that we infuse that culture, that music, with intelligent thought, with things that feed our heart and empower our soul, and that gets people moving in a direction that manifests the kinds of community and free spaces that they want to live in.
See, I totally agree with what you're saying, because I'm not really a hip hop person, but I'm more of a spoken word artist. So in terms of creativity and what you're saying, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. So I was wondering, going back to what you said as well, where did you get your creativity from? Who inspires you? And how did it all start? Was it from your childhood? Did it manifest from your childhood, or how was it?
Yeah, creativity. I'd like to ask you the same question for your poetry.
Yeah, definitely.
I think my creativity stems both from ancestors, people who have preceded me, and thinking and learning about my history, our her story, as well as dreaming and reimagining the future and what I would like to see in the world. And then it also comes from being very present in the now. And even the sound of the car outside that I can hear right now, that's a beat, right? There are tempos in life, whether that be a pulse or the lid of a can or something like that, that they all have just different sounds that can inspire us. So for me, part of the beauty and inspiration is listening and being free enough to allow myself to express. That makes sense.
I love that. It does make sense. Strange enough, because I'm actually like that as well. I like to hear, when I'm doing my poetry, I like like we were saying with sounds and beat, that's for you. What I do with mine is that wherever I go, I look. Yes. Where you listen for beats, I look for inspiration to write my poetry. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And so my other question:
what do you do when if you get writer's block? Do you ever get writer's block? And if so, what do you do? If I can jump in there.
No, it's okay. You can jump. I don't know really. I have no idea. I just get inspired really. I get inspired straight away. I see it and I write it down. I write down my ideas. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, but I just write down my ideas. What about you? What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's similar that part of creating is also a muscle, and some ways it's like going to the gym or whatever else. That really part of it is just the practice.
Yeah.
And even if you're feeling, oh, I don't know if I feel like this today, or oh, I don't know if I have what, just letting yourself flow.
Yeah, you just keep going. I remember I used to be, sometimes I could just sit down, even on the bus, like on my way home, like when I was in high school. And I would see something and it would inspire me, and I haven't got a pen and paper, but I'll get out my phone and I'll just type it up. And I'm like, no, everybody thinks I'm crazy, but like, you don't understand. If I don't write this, I'm gonna forget it.
Totally.
So yeah, it's just, I totally understand what you're saying. It's so nice that we can relate to each other. So I was also wondering. You speak a lot about in your raps and in your music, and I really love it because I'm like that as well with my channel and my spoken word, trying to get people to find out who they are as an individual. And you always rap about people finding the individuality. So I was wondering, why do you think that's important? For you first, how did you find yours, and why do you think it's important that you teach other people to find theirs as well?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm always growing and evolving as a person, I would humbly say that journey is just ongoing. It's always a process.
Yeah, it really is.
And for me, I think that I want that to be rooted in a sense of respect, both for myself and others, as well as a sense of freedom. What does freedom really feel like, look like, taste like, smell like, in an everyday basis? And so in that way, with these elements that are constantly evolving, and also these dynamics that are embedded in history, I have to constantly undergo this process and challenge myself, oftentimes through that creativity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Of writing myself into existence, of who I want to be, who I am, and who I want to become. And in terms of emphasizing that message of individuality to others, I think it's something that people know even within themselves, even if they feel like, oh, I'm just copying whatever's flowing my way. They know what really makes them happy, something resonates.
Yeah, what makes them tick,
and that sense of purpose. And so I think for me, I'm just highlighting that in the way I know how, which is through my own journey, and just kind of allowing myself to be, and hopefully in some ways it inspires others to do the same in their own way, in their own freestyle path, so to speak.
So one of the things I realized about you watching, reading about you online, is that not just like trying to help people find individuality by rapping about it or singing about it. One of the things I really like about you is because I feel like in a way we kind of connect. And what I like is that you were saying in your TED Talks that there was a young girl, I'm trying to remember from the top of my head, there was a young girl that was having problems at home, and it kind of resonated in her classroom. Her behavior was obviously negative, etc. And a lot of people used to dub her or tag her as a failure or etc. But at the same time, no one understood what she was going, at home, what was going through her mind, etc. So when you met her, you kind of mentored her and trying to really understand who she was. So you started to analyze and, pattern her behavior and stuff. What would you say to, obviously I want you to talk about that a bit more to people and say how you've helped her, but also what I want you to do is, I really want to find out, why do you believe that young people should be helped and should be listened to? And what advice would you give to a young person who might be going through the same problem as the young girl you mentored? What would you say to them? Because a lot of people, they don't really, using my experience, I didn't really have that kind of, I went through the same problems as her as well, having problems at home, teachers not understanding my situation at school. So I had no one there, but thank God she had you at the time. So I want you to talk about it a bit more and say, just kind of give advice of how it's helped her and how other young people what they can do to get help, or
Yeah.
because some people find it really hard to get their words out, even express themselves. That's how my poetry started. You were asking me before, so that's how it started, by just putting out my feelings into paper.
Well, so I think with the first thing that comes to mind actually is, I believe it's inspired by Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, and Sweet Honey in the Rock sang a version, and it goes, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life, longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow that you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you." And I think when I hear those words, for me, one thing I learned in working with young people, and also being a young person in flux in myself, is that young people have voices too, and they're important, and they have thoughts, and they have beliefs, and it's just like, when I work with young people, that's part of the essential understanding that I have, is that I want to respect their thoughts and their voices, and to know that they can also speak for themselves. And sometimes in my role as an educator, it's also been about being an ally in those spaces where maybe there's a prejudice or there's some sort of stereotype that make people not value or not hear young people fully for how they're coming to the table. Because oftentimes I think that even that student that you're talking about, she was expressing herself and trying to let people know what her situation was, and people just really weren't
listening. I totally understand. Yeah.
So for me, I just try to, just like my love of music and the things I'm passionate about, I really like to listen. I try to be very present in that, and then understand how I can be a better ally or synergy builder, or work in partnership with that person if they allow me to, and if that would be helpful to them. And so for that student, I think that's kind of how our relationship built in the classroom and beyond the classroom, in the sense of, the poetry that even we would talk about in the hallways. It wasn't always just the classroom structure time, but also other aspects of the school day. For her, there was so much going on. I know that everything from different kinds of abuse that she was going through, and just a lot of things that were trotting down on her spirit. And on top of it, she would come to school, and the teachers, I could see the stereotypes that they would have of her being a larger person and a person who just had this incredible tenacity, incredible energy, and they were intimidated, I think. And I think it was pretty clear. Yes, yeah. And they were also stereotyping her for her race and a lot of other things. And I could just see the way that her brilliance, she could pick up immediately on how people were viewing her. And then she started to embody that. If that's what people want. And they also would give her more attention for that, right? If she were to bang a wall or do something, then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, don't do that." And she would get more attention than she would get for, getting an A on a test. And it would be more direct, more quick. And so she started to embody these expectations that other people had imposed on her, versus just being who she was, what she would express in her poetry, what she would express, in conversations when someone was talking to her like another human being, as she deserves to be talked to, with respect and dignity. Then she would open up in the way that she felt more fully herself, at least as she put it to me.
Like felt comfortable in her own skin.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really important.
Exactly. I'm a caring person. I could see that she had great leadership, all these different things. So for me, her empowerment was up to her. That was really her working. The best thing I could do is believe in her and be a positive voice or a reminder when those tough times came, to say, that person's belief is not necessarily, true. Don't let their reductions of who they think you are reduce you. That's, you have power. Use it, exude it. transform the situation a little. And the biggest thing, actually, she had this love of poetry and of writing, and I found a lot of Rumi poems. I really enjoy reading Rumi, and I wrote pieces of Rumi's poetry on paper. And whenever she would do something, whether she was going through a hard moment or if she did something that she was really proud of, I would give her one of those slips of paper throughout the day, or she could come up and be like, "Miss Aisha, give me one." And she would get a little piece of a Rumi poem. And that, for her, I think that helped spur, like, once we started that process, it helped spur kind of an evolution of who she presented herself to be in the larger school and academic environment. And she started excelling and doing different things because she had that reminder of what an incredible, dynamic, intelligent, amazing human being that she was.
You know, and I totally agree. Yeah, really is, because that's also one of the reasons why I started my channel, literally, because I truly believe that a lot of young people, they need to see that other young people such as yourself, you know, they're doing positive things, they, you know, trying to achieve greatness and trying to empower other young people, but sometimes they haven't got that platform. So it's really nice, and it's kind of how I came up with my idea in the whole. But what would you say to, going back to what we were saying, to a young person who's probably in her situation, that's too afraid to speak to someone because, I don't know, for example, they might be going through the same situation at school? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, there are so many different, well, I think in part it depends on really what that young person is going through, because there are a lot of different kinds of support.
There is.
But one element in terms of, for example, this young woman with her poetry and when she's speaking and speaking out, I think in some ways, if she continued to galvanize allies and to know that she is not alone and she doesn't have to be alone, then to call on people, because there are times where sometimes then if she felt a certain way, she could hide something that could easily have helped change the situation. So being able to speak to that, and even through poetry, that sharing, for example, your poetry, or sharing some of your thoughts that maybe for some reason there's a voice that within you or around you that says, "Oh, that's not important." Letting that go and pushing, exercising that muscle of courage a little bit to be vocal, I think can be a very powerful thing. And once people understand your story or can hear a little bit more of your story, then they can relate and they can also do something, hopefully. But also, I mean, we know, at least I know, that school system was fraught with many issues, like reporting different things going on in the house, all these different things. That is not a perfect process, and that can be a really big challenge. But once again, knowing you're not alone in that, being your own best advocate and best friend. And also, I think part of the work that we would do in conversations we would have is also about self-love and what she could also generate for herself. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
because I think that without her being her own best advocate first and her own best friend, it wasn't fair. She had to grow up very quickly. All these things, right? Where it's like, yeah, that's not fair. And at the same time, you have to be there for yourself so that other people, you can model that for other people. Even as a young person, you can be a teacher for so many others. And your voice is important.
An inspiration. Yes.
Absolutely.
You just summed up my whole YouTube channel. I'm glad.
Thank you.
So, alhamdulillah. So, I want to ask also, you know, elaborating on what we were just talking about, you know, young people, they're so creative and they...
Can I add something really quickly?
Sure.
I think also, I want to just not focus on this one young person, because a lot of the quote unquote issues that arose in that school were not her. Like, it's a really big problem, I think, when people refer to young people as issues or problems, because then all of a sudden the dehumanization starts, right? And I needed to turn the lens on the teachers, and a lot of the work that I did was also going to the teachers and being like, okay, so I noticed that you treat this student this way and this student that way. Let's talk about this. You know, going to the principal and saying, well, you know, one of your teachers just did this to a student, which is not allowed, and that's really racist and prejudiced, you know, and like citing different instances and really being an advocate with also some of the adults. Being fair. And I think I just wanted to clarify that point, because sometimes I think the lens is only focused on young people, and it tends to be very two-dimensional, and it misses a lot of the other elements where everyone we're interconnected and we all have a responsibility in how that community thrives and grows and how people within that community and the environment can thrive and grow.
It reminds me what you just said. It reminds me of that film. I'm presuming you've watched it, Freedom Writers. Yes. So it reminds me a lot of that as well. How they just neglected a couple of young people because they were underachievers, but they were focusing on this type of. It's so amazing, and it's good in a way that things like these are emerging now because people are seeing, oh, okay, you know, because it shows so much positivity, which is really amazing. Going back to what you're saying about self-love. And, you know, being confident. One of the things that I realize with young people in general is that they don't, sometimes, for example, they might have an opportunity that is right in front of them, but they're too scared to go and get it. Going back to your TED talk, when you're saying about, I'm trying to remember again, the band that you saw, and you literally just walked into their dressing room and you just spoke to them, and then the woman just offered you to be in the band with them as a backup singer, and then you agreed, and you were like, if I didn't walk in, because if I didn't have the courage, etc., I wouldn't have got that once in a lifetime opportunity. So what would you say? I really want to feel like what was going through your head when that happened, the incident. Talk to me about it a bit more, but also emphasize on the importance of sometimes, even if you might not have the confidence or you're working towards getting the confidence, if you see something that you really want or someone that you really want to speak to and they're standing right in front of you, for example, you need to go there and do it. How did it feel like for you when you were going for it?
Yeah, I think the shortest way I can sum it up is think big.
Yeah,
think big, you know, and be willing to put yourself out
Experiment.
there.
It's the best.
Yes,
it's the best feeling.
I think that some of the greatest obstacles to people getting, if they want to go there or they have kind of a dream, one of the greatest obstacles can often be ourselves and our decisions to cut ourselves short before we even reach. I think about this. I like to exercise a lot too, because for me that's also a meditation, and so I think about it sometimes in terms of physical activity. If I want to say, oh, you know, I'd really like to be able to lift that weight, I could stand there for 10 years and just be like, I wish I could lift it. I'm just gonna think, no, I can't do it, right? I could just stare at it, right?
Yeah.
Or I could start little by little each day, or if I could give it a try, and I might surprise myself. I might build up a muscle, something, you know, I might get a trainer, all these different things, but part of it is a muscle. That moment of daring to take a healthy risk. And so in that instance with and her band, and they were all sitting kind of in a circle behind the scenes of this big festival and all talking, and you could tell there was just kind of a community family vibe amongst themselves, and I thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing? You know, the first step for me was I envisioned it in my head. So I was standing there for a while, just nervous. I had enough of a hard time just getting backstage, even though I had a press pass. People were stereotyping me as a woman, all this stuff, right? So finally I get backstage. I had been rustled and had all this stress. I cleared it out, and then I took a moment. What do I want? What am I envisioning? What do I want to happen? How will it happen? And I kind of envisioned walking up to them, envisioned introducing myself, that they would talk to me, and what I wanted to offer. And once I had a mental image, I started to imagine it. Then it made it even a little bit more real. The next step was taking literally that physical step. And the only way I could do that was literally just doing it one step at a time. In Wolof, in Senegalese, Wolof, they often say ndunk and dunk, like little by little, shwee shwee, right?
Shwee shwee.
Yeah, it's a little bit
now
like
I understand.
So taking that step and just walking up, and then my mouth is talking before in my head I'm going, ah! But just daring to do it. And in some ways, each time we do that, we get a little bit more bold, and we can dare to also learn a little bit more about the power that we hold. Sometimes, I like how Bell Hooks talks about, people often think about power as this thing, especially feeling oppressed, that power is this external thing. That everywhere else, other people have it, other systems have it, but we don't have any. And that starts to rob ourselves of our own power that we also have within. And so recognizing that and daring to act on it a little bit.
Shwee.
Of course, with common sense.
Yeah, of course.
But it's just...
You have to make that clear.
That's important.
Make that clear. Common sense people. So what would you? So you would just highlighting on what you said. You would say that you would say to young people or any person in general who wants to do something to just have that confidence and go work at it slowly, one by one.
Yeah, and I mean, when I say think big, I also think that means imagining what you want to manifest and going right for the top or whatever it is. The top meaning like defining your own success and determining what that looks like to you.
It means a lot to a lot of people. It means different meanings.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be what someone else told you is success. It's like what does that mean to you and what makes you truly happy? I hope that it's hopefully based in that. Yeah. Another example would be, I remember I'm a big fan of John Legend, not only for his music, but he also does a lot of social activism. And I thought, Raptivism, I did a number of interviews, and I thought, I would really like to talk to him about his activism. Why not? I wrote him, and he said, okay, sure. So I interviewed with John Legend. Wow. But I could have easily stopped early on and been like, oh, no, he will say no one will care, right? And it was just daring to put oneself out there. I did the same thing with Alicia Keys. And when I was, I think I was in middle school or high school, and I was doing musicals. And she was coming to town in Seattle, where I was living at the time. And with the group of students that I'd been with, we had been training all summer long, but I realized that we didn't really get some of the behind the scenes of the industry that we should know as people who aspire to be performing artists and what have you. So I wrote her management and said, hey, we would really love to come see how it works behind the scenes and hear from Alicia herself about her experience in the music industry. And they said, sure, come on through. And they gave us 20 some odd tickets for all the cast to come see her show that week.
Was pretty awesome.
And it's just that matter of imagining. Once again, those are one of those moments where I was scared. I even had doubts. Oh, maybe they won't listen. Maybe they don't care. But just daring to put yourself out there a little bit and to dream and to reach.
I've had moments like that as well where when I see something, and the funny thing about it is that when you've got a vision in your head and you see it, even though the obstacles is hard, but when you see it in your head and you're like, I'm gonna go at it no matter what, you tell a lot of people, they think you're crazy, you're like, calm down. They think you're crazy, but it's important, it really is important just to have the vision and then go at it. Yeah. That brings me back to what you were saying before about stereotyping. I watched one of your interviews, one of your videos, and you were talking about how a lot of people stereotype you being Blackanese, Japanese and black. So I want you to talk more about it, and have you had any issues since then, or do you still have issues, and how do you react when you get people, when you feel like, oh, they're being a bit stereotypical, or they're being a bit racist? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on which situations, but of course, stereotyping, racism, sexism, all these
isms and schisms.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
And they're part of daily life.
Exactly.
Whether I'm on a tour bus or if I'm going to the grocery store, it's often.
But the thing is, but a lot of people, for some reason, I've seen people that because of that they get scared and it stops them. I can use an example. For example, myself, I get a lot of Muslims who tell me, but you're Muslim, like you can't be doing some of the certain things you're doing. Like for example, Islam teaches us that a woman shouldn't raise her voice, so you can't sing, etc. So, but when you want to do it into something positive, like not singing, but if you want to help other people or you want to stand on a stage as a spoken word artist, there's like a bit issues here and there with people. But at the same time, Islam teaches us to love people and inspire them. So for me, it's like, where do I stand? Do you get what I'm saying? So I just wanted to know how it was, for you as a hip hop artist doing what you're doing, and have you faced anything, and how do you do? Because I face it like almost every day. Yes. I'm used to it. It is everywhere, like you were saying. Yeah. So that was my experience.
Yeah, totally. And I definitely relate. I think what you say about love and inspiration shines through. And I have to really listen to that and to know that the way I unfold the art and the way I unfold the activism, even in a daily choice, right?
Yeah, daily choice.
That it's embodied in love. And so when someone says something super ignorant or they make a joke or whatever, and when I speak to them, then it's coming from a place where it's like, I want to build a stronger humanity for all of us.
Yeah,
and that,
exactly.
that has a resonance, you know. And so that's how I address it, is like, I think Cornel West says that love is what justice looks like in public, right? So that's one way.
That's a good quote. Yeah, I like that.
Of understanding it. And I think that's the way I try to embody those everyday moments. And then also know that I have to take and pace myself at times when, if things are really, really intense. We're also a community. So it's not just up to one single person. We can work together to work out those scenarios and issues and situations. And self-care is also important in the context. I've been in all sorts of really inflammatory, difficult racial situations or what have you, gender situations. And sometimes you also need to take a moment to check in with yourself so that you have power for the course.
It's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And it's important, it really is important, you know, even though you're facing, or anyone actually, anyone that's facing stereotypes or, you know, whatever race, religion, male, female, we all go through that. But I think the most important thing is love, like you were saying before earlier, loving what you do and being passionate about it. And you speak a lot about love work, and you're gonna laugh at me, but I went on the internet and I typed up love work because I've never heard it before, and I couldn't find a definition. I was like, Aisha came up with it. And so I want you to talk more about that, because I really love it. I understand, obviously, after hearing you speak and that, I understand what you're trying to say, but I want you to tell me how you came up with the word, and why do you think it's so important to people to be passionate and love what they do? Because not just when you speak, but even through your personality, through your singing or your rapping, I see it. Like when I was watching your videos, I could see like, oh, she really loves what she does, you know, which is pretty amazing. So I want you to tell me a bit more about love work, how you came up with the word, and why it's important for people to love what they do.
So the term love work I actually first heard through my friend Gabriel Teodros, and he's also an amazing MC out of Seattle. And then he was inspired, I believe, by Bell Hooks on the term love work. She wrote a book called All About Love, and she talks about love work as well. Now I've kind of transformed the term when I talked about love work in the Creative Mornings Oakland talk. I talk about how love work is the intersection of a sense of purpose and what makes you happy. So it's that space between those two things, purpose and happiness. And that's for me love work. Things like raptivism, for example, are part of my love work. And I think that also, if I want to go back to the Bell Hooksian term, she talks about love work, I hope I'm characterizing her text correctly in saying, she says love is a verb. It's not just a noun, it's a verb, it's an action. So how do we embody that every day, whether that's through our activism or love ourselves or of relational, the love that we share with other people? It's a verb. And so I think love work can also be multidimensional in that it can, for me, I've used it in the context of talking about the passion that we have in the work we do every day, but it can also be something profound and also deep within oneself, as well as with one's community. That's not always in the form of like the 9 to 5 or, you know, or what we're producing, but it can also just be in the sense of how we take care of each other and ourselves.
What makes us happy, get up every morning and feel like this is my purpose. And
I think also with the folks who might be naysayers or might question what you're doing, part of it is listening to that sense of purpose and what makes you truly happy. And I think that oftentimes we have these we know like, this is what I should be doing right now, or I'm not really sure where this is going, but I can just sense that I need to create this poem right now, or I should go try this. And love work for me also stems from that. It's like listening to that resonant piece in ourselves, because it's speaking loudly. It's up to us whether we're listening
or not.
Go for it.
Go, let's do this. You're very inspirational, literally. You're so inspirational. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be spending some time here with you and getting to know you more. I really, throughout the conversation, I realized that, from mentoring the young girl, the advice you've given, the reason you started Raptivism in the beginning, one of the things I realized is that you're very into community, inspiring young people and, trying to get them to achieve greatness. I want you to talk now more about your there's free education programs that you run. I want you to highlight a bit of each one, what they do, and why you started them.
Definitely. So I believe you're referring to Turn Off the Stereotypes as one of them. That was a project that was kind of the earliest iteration of my community organizing, and definitely a branch that I think led to Raptivism. And I started it as a high school student. I was going to a predominantly white upper middle class school in Seattle area in Washington State. And a lot of the students, I know that they came with great hearts and minds and critical thinking, but at the same time, our education was so limited in the kinds of history that they told us. First of all, not educating about issues of justice at all, for example, or very, very rarely. And also in their households, that people weren't, it seemed like they weren't having conversations, not deep conversations about race, about class, about gender, about religion, so on and so forth. And this would play out every day in the classrooms, and allowed in really difficult and traumatizing ways, even with my teachers, of grading my papers differently than other students, like math tests. I'd look at it and I'd have the same answers as the white student next to me, but she would grade me lower. And when I would ask the teacher about it, she'd say, "Oh, just sit down, be quiet.
Wow.
You're asking too many questions, or you don't know what you're talking about. Everyone look at her. She's a disgrace." And it was just like, this was playing out every day in the school environment. And I think that resonant piece of me went, I can't just sit here and accept this. This is not, it doesn't make sense. I mean, no, it was so uncomfortable for me to go, "Okay, teacher," in that situation, or for another student to say a racist joke and for me to be like, "Ha ha ha, I want to be cool. I'm going to just laugh like everyone else." I just couldn't.
It wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me.
No.
So I started Turn Off the Stereotypes as part of that. And I had this idea about how, for me, musical theater at the time, writing poetry, writing a lot of the poems I wrote, I would read aloud to my class. We had this amazing silent reading section where everyone would be quiet for an hour a week, and each person would have a turn. Whoever wants to can volunteer and read. And sometimes I would write poetry about what was going on in our classrooms, in our school, and speak out. And people, even though if I said to the person, "Oh, what you said about that, such and such was really racist, or we should talk about that," they'd go, "Oh, you're being insensitive," right? When they're talking to me in person. But when I did it through poetry, all of a sudden something opened up.
Yeah.
And so Turn Off the Stereotypes was about bringing together that arts and activism in a way that people could relate and connect to the material. And it started with having some sort of involved workshop, whether that be capoeira or theater or singing or dancing or drumming, by community activist artists, followed by a workshop on race, class, gender, religion, so on and so forth, by Amnesty International or different human rights groups, the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, the Maven Foundation. So I got together different nonprofit organizations to help create more critical dialogue in my community about those issues that were happening in schools, and hopefully let people be more vulnerable with one another so that we could share our stories and see each other and hear each other more profoundly. Another project that I started once I was in college was called the WISE program. That stands for the Whitman Institute of Summer Enrichment. And that was part of the Whitman College. Essentially, there was a large Oaxacan community, a large community from Mexico that lived in the Walla Walla, Eastern Washington area. And it was an issue in the sense that our school represented mainly white upper middle class students from across the nation and didn't necessarily reflect the local community, or a lot of communities for that matter, in the student body and in that incredible liberal arts, critical thinking education that we got. And so recognizing that, the president's office at the school where I was working at the time said they wanted to start some sort of educational program that would definitely speak to and help give whatever tools were needed to the Oaxacan local community and just first generation families, period, working class, what have you. It doesn't matter which color, race, whatever. And so they turned to me and said, "We have no idea how to create this. Can you vision plan it?" And it was my first year of college, but I had an idea, a vision, and I went out and started hiring different student mentors to be part of it, and connecting with local community leaders and talking to families about how they would like the program to be manifested, and getting to know some of the students and the teachers that work with those students, and building the program off of both a vision I had up here, but also a collective vision, if that makes sense, so it would best fit the needs of the students. And that continues to run till today, and it's been a number of years, definitely over 6, maybe close to getting closer to 10 years since that began. And then in San Francisco, I started the Soul Sisters Club, which is an all-girls hip-hop club about empowerment, because I was working in the classrooms, and a lot of times kind of in between the shuffle time, you know, when people are they're talking in between, when the teacher turns around, whatever, the students would go, "Oh, Miss Aisha, can you come here? What do you think, this person's going through this, or she really likes this person?" And they would always ask me for life advice, and sometimes I would notice that they would start to ask me questions even about just college, or they had all these different kinds of questions that to me were about their self-empowerment and about how they relate to other people and where they're going in life. And I thought, we need to have a proper space to talk about this stuff, you know, and not just in between the shuffling times. And a lot of them were interested in hip hop. Oh, you're also a rapper, that's so cool. So I combined those things, having talks about where we're going in life, how we can better support each other, with hip hop culture, and with writing verses of our own, and writing poetry, and really doing exercises where we could learn how to better support one another. Because I knew that after the school bell rings, for most of those girls, they would see each other more often than I would see them. Or even in the classrooms, they had to be each other's best friends. You have to have a support system. So, for example, gossip can be really big in schools, right? People talking about, oh, this person did this or whatever. And so instead of doing that, I had everyone write a compliment on each other's back. Wow. and they went around and wrote compliments, and then they would read it afterwards, and they all kept their little, slips of paper with their different strengths. And it was a way of building solidarity amongst those girls, as well as building a sense of that self-worth and remembering how important and great you are, what greatness you encompass. Eventually it turned into also a Soul Brothers, Sisters and Soul Brothers club, because the boys were like, hey, what about us? So
you have to include everyone. But that compliment thing is really nice. It's actually a good idea. So basically, I'm so happy, and what I want to do now is that I really want to end the interview in 2 great ways. First way is that I want you to tell us what your favorite quote is, inspirational quote, and why it's your favorite. And then after that, I would love for you to sing or rap something. Yeah.
Okay. I think that the first thing that comes to my mind is think big. Again, think big would be, and it's something my grandma would always say, and it seems so simple, and at the same time I think thinking big, daring to be free, to imagine, not just up here, everywhere, that is a really powerful and ongoing process. So think big would be my inspirational quote.
And I love it. I love it.
And then, let me pick you a fruit from the poetry, juices of lyrical wisdom, creativity. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry, seeds of change, roots generations deep, juices of justice, flesh of my ancestors' trust. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry. Let you taste the bittersweetness of my history. Let me pick you a fruit from the poetry. I said, this land made for freedom. For we is dumb, and for you, boo boo, and me. I said, this land made for freedom. For we is dumb, and for you, woo woo, and me. Peace, love, all around the world. Ah, dose of inspiration, raptivism. Yeah, in the house.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Of course,
Such a pleasure to have you. Such a pleasure to have you. Speak now or forever hold your dreams. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Woo.